What kind of person stands in the way of a town's grief? Karen Hollis did, her arms crossed, her face twisted into a scowl that could curdle milk, planted like a boulder in the middle of Main Street. The sun beat down on Willow Creek, a sleepy town where everyone knew everyone's business. And today, the business was mourning. The annual memorial parade was no small thing. A solemn march to honor fallen soldiers, including Tommy Reynolds, a local boy who died in combat 2 years prior. His mother, Ellen, had organized the event every year since, her heart stitched together by the community's love. But Karen had other plans. She'd called the town office that morning, her voice shrill through the phone, demanding the parade be canceled because it disrupted her business. Her bakery, Sweet Crumbs, sat on the parade route, and she claimed the road closure cost her sales. Nobody bought it. Not the mayor, not the townsfolk, not even the stray dogs that wandered the square. Yet there she was, immovable, daring the town to defy her. Ellen Reynolds stood at the head of the procession, her graying hair tucked under a simple black hat, her hands trembling as she held a framed photo of Tommy in his uniform. The crowd behind her, maybe 50 strong, carried flowers, flags, and candles, their faces heavy with reverence. Karen's bakery loomed to the right, its pink awning garish against the somber mood. Ellen's eyes locked on Karen, and for a moment, the air seemed to still. "You can't do this," Ellen said, her voice low but steady, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Karen smirked, her chins wobbling as she leaned forward. "This is my property line, and I say no parade. You don't have a permit for this nonsense." The lie was blatant. The permit had been approved months ago, but Karen didn't care. She thrived on control, on making people squirm. The townsfolk shifted uneasily. Old Mr. Carter, who'd fought in Vietnam, clutched his cane tighter, his jaw set. Beside him, Jenny, the high school history teacher, whispered to her husband, Mark, "She's doing this for attention." Mark nodded, his eyes narrowing. Karen had a reputation. She'd screamed at kids for skateboarding near her shop, reported neighbors for minor zoning violations, and once tried to sue the town for planting trees she claimed blocked her signage. But this was a new low. Ellen stepped closer, her voice shaking now. "This is for my son, Karen. For all our kids who didn't come home. Move." Karen's laugh was sharp, like glass breaking. "Or what? You'll cry me out of the way." The tension crackled like a storm about to break. A few townsfolk stepped forward, forming a loose semicircle behind Ellen. Karen's confidence faltered for a split second, her eyes darting to the crowd. She wasn't used to resistance. Willow Creek was small, its people polite to a fault, but grief had a way of sharpening spines. Ellen's best friend, Sarah, a wiry woman with a voice like a megaphone, pushed through the crowd. "You're not stopping us, Karen. You're not that powerful." Karen's face reddened, her hands balling into fists. "I'll call the police," she snapped, pulling out her phone. The crowd held its breath. This wasn't just about a parade, Anna Maria, it was about a town's heart, its unity, its refusal to let one woman's ego trample their pain. Sarah didn't back down. She'd known Tommy since he was a boy, had baked cookies for his scout troop, had cried at his funeral. "Go ahead, call them," she said, her voice dripping with defiance. "Let's see what Sheriff Dan thinks of you blocking a memorial." Karen hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. Sheriff Dan was a fair man, but he'd lost a cousin in the same war that took Tommy. Karen knew she was on thin ice, but her pride was a stubborn thing. She doubled down, raising her voice so the whole street could hear. "This is my right. You people think you can just walk all over me? I pay taxes. I own this land." The crowd murmured, anger simmering. Ellen's hands tightened around Tommy's photo, her knuckles white. Then came the twist no one saw coming. Jenny, the history teacher, stepped forward, holding a crumpled piece of paper. Her voice was calm but firm, cutting through Karen's tirade. "Actually, Karen, you don't own this land." The crowd went silent. Karen's mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. Jenny held up the papyrus copy of the town's property records, dug up from the archives that morning. Your property line ends at the sidewalk. The street? It's public. You have no legal right to block this parade. Karen's face went from red to purple, her eyes bulging. She'd been so sure of her power, so certain she could bully her way through. But Jenny, quiet, unassuming Jenny, had done her homework. The crowd erupted in cheers, a wave of relief and triumph washing over them. Karen's bluff had been called, and she was sinking fast. Ellen took a step forward, her eyes locked on Karen's. "Move," she said again, not a plea this time, but a command. The crowd pressed closer, their presence a quiet but unyielding force. Karen's confidence crumbled, her shoulders slumping as she realized she was outmatched. She stepped aside, muttering under her breath, her face a mask of humiliated fury. The parade began to move, Ellen leading the way, Tommy's photo held high. The townsfolk followed, their steps deliberate, their voices rising in a hymn that echoed off the buildings. Karen stood alone on the sidewalk, her bakery's pink awning mocking her defeat. But this wasn't the end, not yet. Karen wasn't the type to let a loss go unanswered. The parade moved forward, a river of grief and pride flowing past Karen's bakery. Ellen's face was a study in quiet strength, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the cemetery waited. The townsfolk sang softly, their voices weaving a tapestry of loss and love. Old Mr. Carter limped along, his cane tapping the pavement, while Sarah walked beside him, her arm linked through his. Jenny and Mark brought up the rear, the property records still clutched in Jenny's hand like a talisman. Karen watched from the sidewalk, her face a storm cloud, her hands twitching as if itching to claw back her lost control. The townsfolk didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her, but their silence was louder than any shout. Said, "You don't own us. You don't own our grief." Inside Sweet Crumbs, Karen paced, her heavy footsteps shaking the glass display case filled with untouched pastries. She'd lost the first battle, but her mind was already spinning, plotting her counterattack. She wasn't just going to slink away, she was Karen Hollis, the woman who'd once gotten a neighbor's dog impounded for barking too loud. She grabbed her phone and dialed her lawyer, a slick man named Greg who'd helped her with her endless complaints. "They humiliated me," she hissed into the phone, her voice low but venomous. "I want to sue the town. Defamation, emotional distress, whatever sticks." Greg's voice crackled through, cautious but greedy. "We'll need evidence, Karen. Witnesses, documentation. Can you get that?" Karen's eyes narrowed as she watched the parade through her window. "Oh, I'll get it." She stormed outside, phone in hand, recording the procession. She zoomed in on Ellen, on Sarah, on Jenny, muttering to herself about trespassing and public disturbance. A few townsfolk noticed, their faces tightening, but they kept marching. Karen's video was shaky, her breathing loud, but she was relentless, following the parade to the edge of her property line, shouting accusations. "You're all breaking the law," she yelled, her voice cracking. "I'll have you all in court." A few heads turned, but no one stopped. The parade was bigger than her, stronger than her, and it carried on without pause. Back at the front, Ellen's heart pounded, not from fear but from the weight of leading this march. She could feel Karen's eyes boring into her back, could hear the faint click of the phone camera. It made her skin crawl, but she refused to falter. Tommy deserved this. The town deserved this. She glanced at Sarah, who gave her a nod, a silent promise to stand by her. The cemetery was in sight now, its iron gates gleaming in the afternoon sun. The crowd slowed, gathering around Tommy's grave, where a small stone marker stood, engraved with his name and dates that felt too short. Ellen knelt, placing the photo against the stone, her fingers lingering on the glass. The townsfolk formed a circle, their candles flickering as they began to pray. Karen didn't follow them to the cemetery. She knew better than to desecrate that sacred ground, but she wasn't done. Back at her shop, she uploaded the video to her social media, a rambling post accusing the town of bullying her, of violating her rights. She tagged every local group she could think of, hoping to rally support. "This is what happens when you stand up for yourself in Willow Creek," she wrote. They gang up on you. Within minutes, comments started pouring in, not the support she'd expected, but outrage. You tried to stop a memorial parade? One user wrote. Shame on you. Another, Tommy was a hero. You're just a bully. Karen's stomach dropped as the notifications piled up, each one a dagger to her ego. She'd miscalculated badly. The twist deepened when Sarah got wind of the post. She wasn't one for social media, but her teenage daughter, Mia, showed her the screen, her eyes wide with anger. Mom, she's lying about you. About all of us. Sarah read the post, her jaw tightening. She wasn't tech-savvy, but she knew enough to fight fire with fire. She called Jenny, who'd already seen the post and was drafting a response. We need to tell our side, Jenny said, her voice calm but fierce. Together, they crafted a post for the town's community page, detailing Karen's attempt to block the parade, her lies about the property line, and her relentless harassment. They included Jenny's property records, scanned and clear as day. This is about honoring our heroes, the post ended. Karen Hollis tried to stop us. She failed. By evening, the post had spread like wildfire. Local businesses shared it. Neighbors commented with heart emojis and stories of their own run-ins with Karen. The bakery's Yelp page tanked, one-star reviews flooding in. Karen sat in her shop, alone, her phone buzzing with notifications she couldn't bear to read. She'd wanted to assert her power, to make the town bend to her will, but instead, she'd united them against her. The parade had ended, but the town's resolve was just beginning to burn. Karen's counterattack had backfired, and now she faced a reckoning she hadn't anticipated. The cemetery was quiet now, the candles extinguished, but the fight was far from over. The next morning, Willow Creek buzzed with a different kind of energy. The parade was over, but the town's anger hadn't faded. Karen's social media post had lit a fuse, and the backlash was relentless. Her bakery, once a bustling spot for morning coffee, sat empty, its pink awning sagging like a defeated flag. Karen stood behind the counter, her face pale, her eyes darting to the door every time a car passed. She'd expected some pushback, but not a full-on boycott. The town had turned on her, and she felt it in every unsold muffin, every empty chair. She tried to call Greg, her lawyer, but his voicemail was full. Even he was distancing himself. Ellen, meanwhile, was at the community center, surrounded by Sarah, Jenny, and a handful of others. They weren't gloating, they were too tired for that, but they were planning. Karen's stunt had crossed a line, and the town wasn't going to let it slide. Jenny, ever the researcher, had dug deeper into Karen's history. She's been cited before, Jenny said, spreading out documents on the table. Health code violations, unpaid taxes, even a fine for illegal signage. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes glinting. So she's not untouchable. Ellen nodded, her voice soft but resolute. We don't want revenge. We want justice. For Tommy, for everyone she's hurt. The confrontation came at the town council meeting that evening. The room was packed, standing room only, with faces young and old, all united by a shared purpose. Karen showed up, dressed in a loud floral blazer, her chin high, but her hands shook as she clutched her purse. She'd prepared a speech, claiming victimhood, but the council wasn't having it. Mayor Thompson, a no-nonsense woman with a steel backbone, called the meeting to order. Ms. Hollis, she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. You've been given the floor. Speak. Karen stood, her voice wobbling as she launched into her defense, how the parade disrupted her business, how the town had slandered her online, how she was the real victim. The room was silent, but not with sympathy. It was the silence of a jury about to deliver a verdict. Ellen stood next, her presence commanding despite her small frame. She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. My son died for this country, she said, her words landing like stones. This parade was for him, for all our heroes. Karen tried to stop it, not because of her business, but because she wanted control. She lied about her property, harassed us, and now she's playing the victim. We're done with it. The room erupted in applause, a wave of support that made Karen shrink in her seat. Sarah spoke next, listing Karen's violations, each one backed by Jenny's documents. The council listened, their faces grim. The collapse came swiftly. Mayor Thompson announced that the town would investigate Karen's business practices, starting with the health code violations. The crowd cheered, but it wasn't cruel, it was righteous. Karen's face crumpled, her bravado gone. She left the meeting early, her footsteps echoing in the hall. The next day, inspectors arrived at Sweet Crumbs. They found expired ingredients, unclean equipment, and a stack of unpaid tax notices. The bakery was shut down pending a full review. Karen's empire, built on bullying and bluster, was crumbling. She tried to fight back, posting another rant online, but it was drowned out by the town's unity. Her Yelp page was a graveyard of one-star reviews, her phone silent. The final twist came when old Mr. Carter visited the closed bakery. He'd fought in wars, seen worse than Karen, but he believed in second chances. He left a note taped to the door, written in his shaky hand. "You can rebuild, Karen, but start with an apology." She never responded, but the note became legend in Willow Creek, a symbol of grace in the face of spite. The town moved on, stronger for it. Ellen organized the next parade, bigger than ever, with new faces joining the march. The cemetery was peaceful, Tommy's grave adorned with fresh flowers. Karen left town a month later. Her bakery sold to a young couple who renamed it Hero's Hearth. They baked cookies for the next parade, free for all. Willow Creek didn't forget Karen, but they didn't dwell on her either. They'd faced her down, not with hate, but with the quiet power of community. Ellen stood at Tommy's grave one evening, the sunset painting the sky gold. "We did it, son," she whispered, her voice steady now. "We marched for you." The town had turned grief into strength, division into unity, and one woman's cruelty into a lesson in resilience. They'd won, not by sinking to Karen's level, but by rising above it, together.